C64 has not been a subject of a video for a little while now, so let's talk about some of its games from 1989 today. You know, to carry on with our fun little series. Rock'n'Roll is a game that I would never appreciate back in the day, as I was always craving either something with a lot of shooting, you know, shells flying everywhere, bullets going through dozens of enemies, and with ever-present screams of pain cutting through dense foggy air. That kind of a thing. I'm a bit older now and I can appreciate a different kind of a game, especially as fun as this one. Rock'n'Roll is theoretically as simple as they come. Guide the ball to the exit in each of the 32 included stages and that's pretty much it. Bada beep, bada boom, you won. It's not as easy as it sounds though. Each level is a rather large maze filled with various traps and environmental dangers like sliding doors, laser beams, magnets, explosions, acid tiles and single-use platforms. Not all features are there just to kill you though, so there are also tunnels and teleports to help you get around the maze. And various pickups like color keys to open similarly colored doors, diamonds for points and money. Which, well, you can use to buy useful gadgets that will help you in completing the levels and in survival. There's no enemies in Rock'n'Roll to speak of, but the gameplay is addicting and incredibly fun nonetheless. I know, it's difficult to believe when hearing me talk about a game where you play as a ball, but it's one of those titles that play way better than they look on the video and sound when spoken about. Run the Gauntlet is a gamified version of 1980s TV show of the same name that placed 4 teams from different countries against each other in series of hazardous challenges. The teams you got to choose between are Great Britain, USA, Holland and Australia. I've never seen the show, but I suppose that these were the teams that participated in it most often. The game can be played in multiplayer, but it's alternating, so you'll never directly compete with a friend head to head. Which is a bit of a wasted opportunity if you ask me, but whatever, at least you get to keep that friendship and not end it over a video game. The gamebox boasts of 9 different events, when in reality there's only 3, but you get to compete in them in various vehicles, so there's that at least. Your goal is the same regardless of the vehicle though, so let's stick to there only being 3 really. In first you'll be racing various boats and hovercrafts over a river, navigating between buoy gates. There are obviously obstacles there that will slow you down, so try to avoid them, if you can. If you can't, at least aim not to lose. Then there's the off-road racing, which believe it or not is a carbon copy of the previous event, only not on water and without gates. So if my math is correct, we're down to 2 events only. And finally, third is an obstacle course that will put your wheel and joystick to the endurance test in equal degrees. So as you might have guessed, it's a joystick waggling bonanza, with several different obstacles to jump or climb over. And that's it really. Run the Gauntlet is not great, especially that there's realistically only 2 events in it and one's bound to cost you a joystick and a carpal tunnel syndrome. Not necessarily in that order. But it's not unplayable, and I will argue that it's a good palette cleaner between other games during a retro evening with friends. How would a child between Commando and Green Beret games look like if it would only inherit only the passing resemblance of its parents? Like our game on display, SAS Combat Simulator. It's a title that rolls both classics into one and makes them a little bit less fun to play. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that it's a bad game, it's just nowhere near as good in each of its parts as compared to originals that it copied. But if you wanna run around a bit, shoot some bodies and like variety in your gameplay, it can provide it, no doubt about that. And since it was released by Codemasters, you know that it was discount title through and through. And if you bought it, you still had enough money for another game. Most likely also one of Codemasters. Which could be a hit or miss, if I'm to be honest here. As they had some classic under their wing as much as some real stinkers. SAS Combat Simulator is fun, just not as fun as it could have been with an extra month or so of work. Despite its title, Shark does not place you in fins of a deadly underwater 15-footer. It's a multi-directional flick-screen cover shooter similar to much more well-known Cybernoid. Story-wise, you're traversing underwater caves and installations searching for and destroying enemy alien forces that seized control of the underwater base. You're armed with a gun and have access to limited supply of rockets and mines. The latter are mainly used for exploration purposes to clear obstacles in your path. Since you're underwater, your craft falls down, or descends really I should say, continuously. So you have to counteract it constantly too. That said, if you'd like to go downwards, there is no way of rushing it, it can only go as fast as its natural descent pace is. So that kinda freed a downward joystick movement, which is now utilized to switch to those extra weapons. Enemies are not very adventurous or aggressive, and they usually only move around their pre-assigned paths. There's 3 levels in the game, and as far as I remember, they don't cycle around, so when you're done with them, it's game over. For better or worse. Graphics and sounds are pretty nice, and overall Shark is a decent simple shooter. It's not as good as Cybernoid I mentioned initially was, but given its original budget release method, it was well worth the price it retailed for. Sega's arcade port of Shinobi on C64 is superb. It's a side-scrolling action arcade beat-em-up where you play as Joe Musashi, who has to battle his way through numerous levels rescuing hostages. Kinda like Man-Bat used to for a living whenever Joker and Penguin kidnapped innocents or whatnot. I'm Batman. What? Is it really that important? Okay. Batman's asking me to tell you that Riddler and Mr. Freeze also used to keep hostages from time to time. So here you go, a bit of Bat trivia that's most likely never going to be useful to you. Anyway, you're armed with bazillions of deadly shurikens and even deadlier tools of destruction, so your explosive punches and world-shaking kicks. Clearly something you've learned from Chuck Norris. Realistically, they may neither explode nor shake anything, but they're extremely effective at disposing of the enemy scum. There's also quote-unquote bomb-like ninja magic that clears the screen of all enemies, but good-hearted bad boys such as yourself, my awesome viewer, would never resort to using those final means of annihilation unless left with no choice, now would you? Are you crossing your fingers while saying you wouldn't? Really? Oh man. Anyway, Shinobi features all levels found in original and even the famous bonus stage in which you're throwing shurikens inwards at the screen at approaching enemies. Graphics and sounds are beyond excellent, perhaps not on the arcade level, but as good as it was possible to achieve on C64 in 1989. So if you played Shinobi in the smoke-filled arcades and then had a chance to experience it at home on C64, you wouldn't be disappointed. Arcade conversions in late 80s to small and rapidly aging 8-bit systems were often hit or miss. And our shuriken-spewing hero is definitely a sterile example of how such ports should be made. Easily one of the best games on the system. Speaking of ports from arcades and some of the best games on C64, Silkworm. Or Silkworm, I can never tell. Just a mere year after Silkworm landed in the arcades, C64 got its port, and oh boy what a glorious piece of adrenaline-rushing software that was. On the surface, it's a simple standard horizontally scrolling shooter in which you go from left to right, defeating seemingly infinite waves of various enemies, finding power-ups, smart bombs, invincibility, and fighting huge as end-level bosses. It's worth noting though that they're not as difficult as the rest of the game is, which is quite odd, I must add. All that coupled with nearly arcade-perfect presentation, sounds and graphic-wise, well at least to the level C64 could achieve, makes for an incredibly fun, even if really punishing gameplay. But that's all on the surface, because obviously as most of you know, Silkworm's biggest and best feature is its simultaneous two-player mode, when one of you flies a copter while the other drives a jeep. It was a unique at the time concept and a very playable one at that, especially that not rarely my friends and I would get into stupidly long arguments who would play as copter, as it was much easier than trailing behind in a jeep. Still, even those arguments were part of a fun, part of atmosphere and the whole Silkworm shebang. If you never played it and are watching this video, I don't believe you, you must be lying, but if you really never played it, do it. But only if you get someone to play it with you, as even though it's fun alone too, it's just not the same. SimCity. What could be said about this game that haven't been said before? It's a triple threat, a legendary title, a first in its own genre, and it was made by legendary now developer and designer Will Wright. On an odd chance that odd one or two of you don't know what SimCity is, I'll try to explain. It's a city building simulation in a top-down overhead view where you build from ground up and manage expansion of your city. You're responsible for any and all infrastructures, road and railroad layout, and development of all residential, commercial and industrial zones. In fact, the RCI meter named after these zones have been a staple land demand and development marker for majority of games in the genre. And since we're on the subject, release and eventual popularity of the game, SimCity spawned the whole genre of city building simulations and set Maxis on a path of releasing non-linear simulations of various often unimaginable and creative kinds. At the time of its release, SimCity offered unprecedented depth and unknown at that point to gamers of 1989 gameplay loop of simming and designing. You have to make sure that all individual power lines are connected, that buildings, zones and services are placed next to roads, and that residential areas are nowhere near dirty and polluting industries. It's your responsibility to make sure that there's appropriate police and fire department coverage, that there are schools, hospitals and parks within your city limits. You become a de facto and omnipotent city planner only limited by the city budget and your imagination. It's an amazing title and worth playing even today. Have you ever dreamed about being a spy? I mean, not like going to spy high school, then college and then just becoming one, cause that's not how it happens. Or does it? I don't know really. If you do, let me know in the comments below. I'm curious. It's not for me, it's for friend. Yeah, a friend. But have you considered how fun, glamorous and action-packed it would be to be one? Spy that is. I mean, we've all seen the movies, some of us read some books even, we know how it is, right? Fast cars, beautiful women, big and small guns, and tons upon tons of gadgets for any situations you may need them to save you from. Explosives in pants, cameras in shirt buttons, pistols in belt buckles, lassos in butter knives, cell phones in shoelaces, the likes. Oh, it would be so grand to be a spy. But since I'm a bit older now and clearly not a spy, well, come to think of it, even if I was one I couldn't tell you anyway, so... I'm Batman. What? Oh, okay. Batman said that he would tell you, cause he's the world's greatest detective and his bat coat prevents him from telling bat lies. So, yeah, see, I'm definitely not one. But thanks to amazing 100% true to life and based on real facts only simulations like Sly Spy Secret Agent, I got to at least feel like one for a minute. Sly Spy was designed with the help of former spies from US, UK, Russia, Cambodia and Wakanda, to paint the experience as realistically as it was possible. And the simulation was born. Don't fact check it, it's unnecessary, I've never led you astray, have I? So you start the game, simulation, free falling from the sky fighting off buddies before eventually parachuting to safety. Soon after, you're in a motorcycle chase just to end up underwater with razor sharp harpoon a minute later. And that's just scratching the surface. Life of a spy has never been so much fun. The action and missions you'll partake in are simulated to excessive detail down to all the shootouts, bodies piling up and even an ever-present secrecy, and divided into easily accessible and completable sequences that vary quite considerably, and will keep you at the edge of your seat all throughout. It may seem to you when you indulge yourself in its glorious fun, however, that Sly Spy is a bit easy for a simulation and one could risk saying that perhaps it's dumbed down to serve the masses, or even worse, just an arcade game. But I assure you that it's one-to-one mirror image of what real spy's life truly is. Just think about it. How often you've seen a spy protagonists die in the movies? Or not end up overcoming overwhelming odds? Or not coming out unscathed from potentially deadly situations? See, spies in real life always win, and that's why they win in Sly Spy Secret Agent 100% True to Life Simulation 2. Once again, don't fact check me on that, or I will have to send Batman on a super secret mission to where you live. For no reason, don't worry, he'll just get there to, say hi from me. Snare is an arcade top-down puzzle game in shooter's clothing. It's composed out of 20 big levels, and all you really need to do is find the exit teleport from each to move to the next. Story-wise, it's said that whomever completes all of them will find a mysterious and valuable item at the end. I can pretty much promise you that there's nothing there. Batman finished the game more than once, and all he ever got out of it was stress and raised blood pressure from all the near deaths he barely escaped. Since we're on a subject, there's quite a few different enemies, and they all behave uniquely. You can shoot them though, so as long as you're good with your aim, you should be alright. The first levels lure you in with easy level design and a lot of shooting, just to drop you in the deep water soon after. So very quickly you'll find yourself scouting the levels for various switches to complete the switch puzzles and navigate complicated corridors full of special tiles, some of which have unique functionalities that can harm or help you. There are also numerous power-ups like skip lever or extra lives, but they only stay on the screen for a short while, so should be scooped as soon as you can before they disappear. Oh, and they are activated after you complete the level you found them in, so keep that in mind that they're not instantaneous. Snare is fun, and even if it's not absolute best arcade puzzler on C64, it's definitely out there with the best ones. Space Rogue is one of the most unique games on C64. The end. Now watch the video and figure out why yourself. You really thought that I'm gonna leave you there hanging, didn't you? You know I wouldn't do it to you. Could someone who shelters homeless Batman, yes, plural, be as heartless to treat anyone like that? Don't answer. Perhaps it's best I don't know what you think. Anyway, Space Rogue is a space combat simulation and RPG hybrid with some trading mixed for good measure. Your mission is to find the evil Manchu raiders who destroyed your original ship and take revenge for all the deaths of your crew members. If you simplify it to the most basic of motivations, that is. In reality, you'll be traveling numerous space systems, interacting with various characters, fulfilling many quests for them, usually ending with a substantial or helpful rewards. You'll fight in space against various kinds of enemies, you'll trade, and generally speaking, you will live your best modern sci-fi space life. Though it's not gonna be sci-fi to you, since you're gonna be experiencing it in real time. It's sci-fi to us, sad sots just sitting here and watching videos about it. And all that while working towards completing the game's main story. Your ship is fully upgradable and you should take advantage of that, equipping it not only with the best weapons but also devices that would extend its capabilities. For instance, make it stealthier, which I don't have to tell you will be incredibly handy all throughout the game. There are various factions within the universe of Space Rogue and you have a separate reputation with each of them. It is based on your actions and will change as you play depending on who you help, fight and how you behave. Space Rogue is kinda like much later Frontier but on a considerably smaller scale and with a storyline. If you like space operas and are a sci-fi nut, Space Rogue is easily one of the better games in the genre on C64 and of 1989 overall. If you're not a nut, then congratulations. It seems it just may be me being crazy. While first Speedball was not as well known or polished as its successor was, it was still really fun and based around earlier iteration of uniquely designed futuristic sport, a mixture of handball and hockey that rewarded violent and aggressive play. The game is played by two teams on an enclosed pitch with a goal at each end. There are two pillars that bounce the ball and change the speed and direction it's going, and a hole in the middle of each side of the court teleporting the ball between them. They serve as sort of randomness-inducing element during matches. Speedball can be played in two modes: Knockout, where you face increasingly tougher teams, and League, which, well, obviously allows you to play out a league season. During matches, coins and power-ups appear randomly on the field. Coins can be used between matches to permanently upgrade your team or buy bonuses. Power-ups, however, only work throughout the match they appeared in. And finally, the game is won by the side that scored the most goals. Naturally, as with most games that have multiplayer built in, Speedball is also best played against friend rather than versus CPU. And if you want to end a particular friendship and don't know how, invite them in, fire up Speedball and beat their asses 5-6 times in a row. I can pretty much guarantee that that friendship is no more. You can quote me on that. Spherical is an arcade puzzler very similar to Solomon's Key, but unique enough to stand on its own legs as its own game. You must guide the ball through each level to the exit, marked as in, by creating and removing blocks in its way. You have no way of influencing the ball's movement other than by the use of these blocks, so you make sure to take care and lay them out correctly. Fortunately, before the ball starts moving initially, you have 20-ish seconds, so it's good to get to it straight away. There are some enemies on most levels and they obviously should be avoided, and there are also bonuses, which can make or break your game. So judging when and where to go and what to skip is crucial. Spherical takes a little while to get used to and understand, but when you do, it's a hell of a game, and fun time well spent. Easily one of the most creative puzzlers of 1989. I love everything Star Trek. Well, perhaps apart from Star Trek Prodigy, but that's the only outlier. Anyway, like I said, I love Star Trek. Now, back in 1989, to be quite honest with you, I'm not sure if I fully grasped what it was all about. So, sadly, I've never played Star Trek The Rebel Universe on C64. Everything I will say about it then will be based on what I found online. Keep that in mind. Story-wise, for whatever the reason, many of the Federation starships have mutinied and joined Klingons, so a plan is formed to stop the spread of it, and it involves wrapping the entire area of space in so-called Klein Sphere, sealing it off forever. Which, if I may add, sounds totally not like Starfleet. Perhaps something Section 31 could attempt, but not Starfleet. Still, that's what the plan was. But before pulling the trigger on an inescapable sphere, it was decided to send the flagship, the Enterprise, to figure out what's the reasoning behind all the defections and to find a solution less drastic than the sealing off entire region, which when in place could have caused an all-out war with the Romulans. I gotta tell you that while some things here don't sound very Star Trek-y, for the lack of a better word, the whole premise is really interesting and I would have loved to play it. The Rebel Universe is a graphical adventure with real-time space combat and flying and interesting, even if bit oddly telegraphed away missions. Although while working on solving the mind control crisis... Oh dear, did I just spoil a plot a bit? Anyway, while working on solving the situation, you have to keep the Enterprise in tip-top shape, with both impulse and warp drive charged, and ship structure unscathed. Which is not as easy as it seems, as there have been catastrophe pods added to many of the systems that you visit. They're the alien Spore X of sorts, and they can infect the Enterprise when it enters the system, hatch in 5 weeks and in the worst case consume ship's superstructure, destroying it. So they need to be periodically removed at so-called orbital discontinuums. Rebel Universe sounds like a game I would like, and if I ever have enough free time to play it, I'll make sure to do so, as at least on the surface it seems like fun. Although Starflight originally released on PC in 1986, C64 got its version much later in 1989. It was worth the wait, however, as it's excellent. In essence, Starflight is a sandbox space exploration, trading and combat game. Starflight kinda was like Star Trek, where you have no set path to follow, meaning you can divide your time freely between mining, combat and alien diplomacy. As the time passes by, an overarching plot slowly emerges, and you discover that there was an ancient race of beings that came back and it is causing stars to flare, destroying all living creatures. Starflight was a critical success and was universally praised for its quality when released. It was also a very complex game where you had to take many factors into consideration. For instance, the crew that you hire at the beginning of the game for various positions on your ship had to be chosen keeping their base stats in mind so that they would be a good fit for tasks that they would then carry out later on. Those skills could be raised, however, by means of training, so even a misfit in time could be transformed into a valued crew member. The game consists of 270 star systems of 800 planets in total, up to 8 per each star. All systems can be entered and planets landed on, even those with gravity over 8G, where your ship would destroy upon landing from stress and structural damage. So, keep an eye on where you go and what you do at all times. Starflight is probably one of the most unusual and interesting titles released in 1989 on C64. It's not for everyone, but it definitely influenced a whole genre of space-based games that came out since. Storm Across Europe is probably the best grand strategy wargame SSI has ever released on C64. It simulates World War II in Europe and places you in control of land, sea and air units along with management of resources, research and unit production. It features 6 historical scenarios and they're called after the period of war they started in and represent factual real spread of power during conflict in Europe. It also adjusts research, raw materials and unit placement as it was. The game covers a whole map of Europe, from northern Africa all the way to Scandinavia, divided into countries and this in turn into smaller regions of strategic importance. Units that you control are not singular because of the scope of the game and represent whole squadrons, brigades and fleets and all together form your armies. Did I mention that you can research atomic bombs? You can, but whether that's something you should do or not is entirely up to you. Storm Across Europe is played in turns, with each of these representing 3 months of in-game time. So while it may seem initially that the game can be completed quickly, if you're not gonna dramatically win or lose early on, it will take a long while solely because of the scale of it and how much you can do in it. While Storm Across Europe may not be the best or even in the top 20 grand strategy games today in 2023, in 1989 it was easily the top spot. And if you like those kinds of historical strategy titles, it's really fun even today. Stormlord is an action platformer with adventure elements. You're the titular Stormlord, but despite what it sounds like, not Thor. This is not MCU. We have Batman here. I'm Batman. Yes, you are, buddy. Yes, you are. Anyway, you have to save fairies living in your kingdom from the grasp of an evil witch. So, in each level you have to find a certain number of these and free them. To do so, you'll need to defeat the enemies as much as solve some minor puzzles by use of many objects that you'll discover on your way. Most of the puzzles are pretty simple and have very obvious solutions, like having to use the honeypot to lead the bees away from the fairy that they're guarding and the likes. Stormlord is not the easiest of games, but it's pretty fun and definitely worth completing. Graphics wise, it's absolutely top quality that the C64 could offer in 1989 and has a nearly very early 16-bit look to it, with a lot of attention given to all the character and enemy sprites. Backgrounds are a bit disappointing though, but I suppose you can't win them all, can you? Sounds and music are great, Sid really stretches its muscles with this one and it plays great too, even if it feels a bit repeatable at times, having to take same routes quite often, seeing the same things. So if you like adventure platformers, Stormlord is definitely worth tracking down. If you don't, then well, I can't help you really, you have to make up your own mind about it. Give it a try at least, I'd say though. Street Rod is a very unusual and unique title for the year. In basically all iterations of it, so this, C64, Amiga and DOS, everything about it is great, but the racing. So something that most racing games really base their entire gameplay on. Sounds odd? Well, in essence, all the game features apart from the races are quite fun. Races themselves, while not the worst, are meh at best. The main attraction here is the fact that in Street Rod you buy your own cars, take them apart, soup them up, and then challenge other drivers for money and pink slips. The money you can win can be spent on upgrades and buying new hot rods. Upgrades require disassembling and then putting back together all the necessary parts. No other game at the time allowed for freedom of tinkering and changing cars' performance to such a degree, and not many since. Pity though that the racing, so the main fare of the title, was not the best. In this, however, it reminds me of my beloved Fallout games. Most Fallouts in the series I loved, but then came Fallout 4. And while it was really fun post-apocalyptic shooter, it was a terrible Fallout and not an RPG at all. Same here, great game full of novel and groundbreaking for the time ideas and a lot of things to steal hours from you, but not a very good racer. Stunt Car Racer is probably one of the most creatively designed and playable racers of 1980s, if not the most even. The game is based around the Racing League, divided into 4 divisions. Each of these has 2 tracks and 3 drivers, including yourself. making for a total of 8 unique tracks and 12 drivers. I'm Batman. I'm sorry, what? I know, but... yeah, you're right. Manbat asked me to spare you the math, not in those words though. Anyway, every next stage to race on is a bit more difficult than the previous and often more interesting too. And it's all because the game's most notable feature are the elevated and Daredevil-worthy tracks. They are in essence differently shaped ramps and jumps raised to ungodly heights with no railings on the sides. So there is nothing stopping you from just falling off or not making into a sharp corner and jumping off the track entirely. As you can probably imagine, it adds a lot to the excitement of racing and requires skill to master. Stunt Car Racer also features a damage system where each bump with opponent's car or bit too harsh landing from a jump increases damage, indicated by the cracks on the car's frame. If the car takes too much of a beating, it gets totaled, and that's an instant loss of a race. The game was released on all microcomputers of 1989 and received critical acclaim for all of those ports. But C64's version is widely considered a classic and the best outing, really showing what the Commodore's machine was capable of. Super Scramble Simulator is sadly not a Super Scrabble Simulator or Super Scramble X Simulator, which in itself are games that I need in my life. So if you're a dev with a lot of time to spare, I am willing to be your free game tester. But today's title, the Super Scramble Simulator, is a spiritual successor to C64's Kickstart. So you'll need to ride an obstacle course, or quite a few of these actually, and learn how to operate the gears of the bike, correct positioning during climbs, jumps and landings, and also something that was not present in original Kickstart, namely position of your bike in relation to the track and the obstacles on it. Because other than the side view, which takes up most of the screen, there is also a smaller bottom screen, that's the aerial view showing your bike and all the upcoming hazards, so that you could dodge them accurately. Super Scramble Simulator is not a game for everyone, and not only because it tackles a very niche subject, but also because it's really difficult and will take some time to master. But if you like the earlier Kickstart, you will absolutely love this one too. Terry's Big Adventure is one of the best 8-bit microcomputer platformers and also one of the least known ones. So if you never heard of it, don't worry, you're in the vast majority. While on first glance it may look like another Super Mario clone with tile-based graphics, left-to-right scrolling levels and omnipresent mushrooms, this is really where all the similarities end. I mean, sure, it follows the typical for the time platforming tropes and may have been inspired by Mario, it's definitely its own game. Unlike Super Mario, there's no story to Terry. All you have to do is complete each of the 12 long levels, getting to the exit unscathed, which is not as easy as it may seem initially, for there are many various creatures that are out to get you, as deadly as in other games water, cause everyone knows that nothing good ever came out of water, right kids, and many more. In short, the lands in which Terry is on his titular adventure are anything but safe. Not everything is deadly though, cause if it was, it wouldn't be an adventure, but a nightmare. So Terry gets to run around collecting mushrooms, bashes and other stuff for points, and generally speaking, the lands that he's traveling are lush and pleasant to look at. Oh, and before I forget, Terry is sporting a boomerang for long-range attacks and yo-yo for short distance, which makes him anything but harmless. So perhaps it's not the creatures out to get Terry, but it's Terry hunting hundreds upon hundreds of innocent woodland creatures. That's something to ponder about. Anyway, use of very simple physics is an interesting choice for a platformer, but devs decided that it was the thing to do, and I gotta say it's more hit than a miss in my books. Though some of you may disagree. What am I talking about even? Well, a momentum, meaning it takes a little while when you run to reach the top speed, but stopping is also not instant, and you have to keep that in mind as Terry needs to slow down to a full stop. Terry's Big Adventure is a definition example of the hidden gem on C64, so if you've never had a chance, track it down, it's excellent. And that's that when it comes to second to the last of episodes for 1989. C64 had some really cool games in the year, and there's still few more to come. So stay tuned, as I will be back with another one of these very soon. If you liked the video, hit those like and subscribe buttons below. If you didn't, well then there's thumbs down there too. But I suppose you wouldn't have persevered up to this point if you really didn't. Around 60% of you are not subscribed, and there's currently no way of knowing if YouTube will decide to recommend you the next episode or not, other than subscribing and hitting that bell, that is. And when you hit that bell, whenever the new video is out, YouTube will actually send you a small and friendly notification about it, so you wouldn't miss it. If you'd like to support the channel, Patreon and YouTube memberships are a great way of doing so. They will help me release better content, and also they get first dibs on all new videos before they're publicly accessible on YouTube. If you can't or don't want to do that though, likes and subscribes are great too. I would like to take a moment here and thank all the YouTube creators from whose videos short bits were taken to serve as a background to my commentary. They're amazing and stars among the retro community. You will find names of their channels at the top of the screen when their footage is running, and also in the video description below. For me though, this is all, so have a good one and I'll see you next time. Peace.